Hello, welcome to this video on how to open Visual Studio, enter in a program, and run your C program code. This video assumes that you've already downloaded Visual Studio 2019. If you have not, go to our course homepage under Content. There's a Visual Studio folder with download instructions. So make sure that you've downloaded Visual Studio first. If you have, then you're going to click on the Window button. You're going to scroll down to the V's. If this is the first time you've opened Visual Studio, you'll have New next to these words. But if not, you'll go ahead and just click on Visual Studio 2019. I use it so often that I have pinned Visual Studio to my Start menu bar at the bottom. Okay, once Visual Studio opens, then we're going to say Create a New Project. And what you want to look for is Empty Project, Start from Scratch with C++. We're not going to program in C++, but this is the option that we need to select. If it's not easily found, you can go up to Language and look at all the languages that Visual Studio can handle. Under Languages, select C++, select C++, and then you can see that Empty Project Start from Scratch option. We hit Next. Now, Visual Studio is going to create a folder on our desktop that holds everything it needs to run our C programming code. It's going to have some pre-processed directives that are needed, any libraries that we include in our program, and our program itself. It's a main.c file. Everything is bundled into a nice folder on our desktop called a project. So let's name that project, let's name that folder, and this is the convention that we're going to use. Whatever lab number we're turning in, lab 10, lab 8, here we're going to just use an example, say lab 1. We're going to give it the first letter of our first name and then our last name. So this is the name of a folder that Visual Studio is going to create and place on our desktop. To be sure that it's on our desktop, we want to make sure that it doesn't have the repository folder that is the default. We don't want to go to the C drive, the users folder, the ysandoval folder, the source folder, the repos folder just to find what we need. We want it to be easily found on our desktop. So you can either use the drop down, make sure that it's on the desktop. If it's not in your drop down, come over to the browse dots. Make sure you're not in quick access. You don't have permissions there. Make sure you're in this PC desktop. And then we'll hit select and create. Notice what it did. Visual Studio put that folder on our desktop, and that folder creates everything it needs to run our program. Okay, so from here, we're going to go to Project, Add New Item. Okay, so that was Project, Add New Item. And down here in Name, this is where we're going to tell Visual Studio that we're not programming in CPP, C++. We're programming in C. So we want this to say main.c. This should say main.c. We're programming in the C programming language. We'll click Add, and we're ready to program. Okay, so things to look out for in this tab, we see .c. If it says .cpp, then you want to close out and start over. It'll run your code in C++, which what we do will not always run in C++. So you want to make sure it says main.c. Okay, every program has a header, so you're going to type in this header. Engineering 175, summer 2020, your name. My name's Yvonne Sandoval. Here you would put in your name, the date created on, today is 5/26, and then this statement tells me that you're turning in your own work and not the work of anyone else. So copyright, Y. Sandoval, all rights reserved. I'm turning in the code that I wrote, not anybody else. Then you're going to write a very brief description of what your program does. Maybe it's this program calculates the area of a rectangle. Whatever your program does, you're going to describe it briefly here. This is called a preprocessed directive. We're going to suppress any scanf warnings that we may get when we put input from the keyboard. We'll talk about that in class. We're going to include the standard input-output library, which has the scanf, read from the keyboard command, and printf, print to the screen commands. Again, we'll go over that in class. This starts your program, int main void. This ends your program, return 0. For every open curly bracket, we need a closed curly bracket. For every statement that we write in C, every statement must end in a semicolon. Okay, so we're going to have our heading. We're going to have maybe a few preprocessed directives. We may include a few libraries. We have the start and stop of our program. We type all that in. We're ready to run our code. So we're going to say debug, start without debugging. Okay, debug, start without debugging. This nice green line appears, which means our code compiled and ran without error. And it'll say that here at the bottom. Build says 1 succeeded, 0 failed. So I know my program compiled and ran without error. Our program didn't do anything. So in our debug console, in this black box, it just says, okay, exited with code 0, exited with code 0. I've done what the program wanted me to do, which in this case was nothing, and it compiled and ran without error. It exited with code 0. If you have errors, then they'll appear and you won't have that exited with code 0 command. Okay, press any key to close this window, so we'll go ahead and just hit the space bar. And now I want to, my program's ready to turn in for grading. I'm going to go into File, Save All, and then go ahead and close this out. Now let's say I'm ready to submit and I forgot something. Oh, I forgot to put in this line. So I'm going to click on my folder. I'm going to go to the .sln, the solution folder, and notice that it brings up Visual Studio with my code, and I can edit and change things as needed. Okay, main.c over here. If you don't see your code, main.c here. If your code doesn't show, maybe I got the date wrong. It was really the 28th instead of the 26th. But here I just wanted to show that you can change things and then File, Save All, close this Visual Studio box. Everything is here. Okay, I want to upload my work, so that's always going to be in Assessment Assignments. In Assessment Assignments, though, I cannot upload this folder directly. It's too large. Okay, so let's go ahead and compress it. Okay, we're going to right-click. We're going to say Send to Compressed Zip Folder. Okay, right-click, Send to Compressed Folder. And the compressed folder is what I'm going to drag and drop into the Lab 1 folder to turn in my work. Okay, that is the end of our short video. If you need to rewind and rewatch, maybe a few times until we get more comfortable with the Visual Studio environment. See you in class.